Are you a farmer or butcher ready to master direct-to-consumer marketing and meat success? Then you're in the right place. I'm Jared Aachen, the founder of ChopLocal. Each episode of this podcast features interviews with farmers and butchers who have built successful direct-to-consumer meat businesses, and they're going to share their secrets for success with you. From actionable tips to inspiring stories, this podcast has ingredients you will need to succeed in the meat business. After the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow us on social. And check out the rest of our educational resources at ChopLocalUniversity.com. Now, let's turn it over to my business partner, Katie, to get started.
Welcome to another episode of Meat Success. I am Katie Olthoff. I am the co-founder of ChopLocal and ChopLocal University, and I'm joined here today with another of our ChopLocal vendors, Marc from Cedar Road Meats in Wisconsin. Marc, thanks for hopping on here with me today. Give everybody just a short overview of what Cedar Road Meats does and what your business is all about.
Thanks for having me, Katie. So Cedar Road Meats has been around since 2004. We just celebrated our 20th anniversary last summer. We are a federally inspected meat processing facility. We do custom processing for local farmers. We also have a storefront, and then we make products that are sold at the retail counter in different supermarkets throughout Madison and Milwaukee.
Okay, so normally I ask this towards the end of the interview, but I want to ask it at the beginning because you have this 20-year history. So your parents started the business, and I want to know what success looks like for Cedar Road Meats and maybe how that has changed throughout the years.
So success for Cedar Road Meats initially was probably just getting by, providing a good service for the farmers and our customers at that time. And my parents were not from the industry. They're not meat butchers. They built the facility on one of our farms in rural Wisconsin in Dodge County. And so their background was not in butchering and processing meat. So just surviving was the first measure of success for us. And that changed over the years. But then as we grew to the point of being able to provide a good service to our farmers, then start to grow opportunity to sell our products in our storefront. And now, as I've taken over in the last 10 years, the levels of success have changed significantly. So first thing was being able to meet the needs of our farmers and producers in the area. And then from there, provide more services, whether it was online sales, provide more products in the store to sell to our customers. At the end of the day, the main level of success for me was being able to be sustainable as a business. By sustainability, I mean being able to provide a good living for all of our employees. So once we could do that, then everything after that was great. So that took us a while to get to that point, probably about 15 years until we could get to where we really needed to be to successfully be sustainable and be more strategic versus just surviving.
Wow. Yeah. I'm sure that there are a lot of listeners out there that can relate, and starting up a business, as I know from starting up Chop Local, it can be really difficult. You're figuring out a lot of different things all at once, right? So when your parents built the facility, was it custom only or was it always an inspected facility?
So it was always inspected. It was state only at the time. So we would do beef, pork, and lamb, and we also did deer processing at the time for the first 10 years. About 10 years ago, when I bought the business, we enrolled in a state program called the CIS, Interstate Processing Program, which allowed us to get federally approved, which means that we could ship our products across state lines or we could ship into other federal facilities. So that was an initiative by the state, I think in collaboration with a couple other states in the area. And so we joined that program about 8 years ago. And that has allowed us to grow the business because we have customers in the state, but they're federal facilities. So in order to receive product from us, we have to be federally approved. So everything that we butcher, everything that we process, everything we smoke, cut, and wrap is all federally approved with the federal legend. And that's what goes on our labels when it leaves the building.
Gotcha. Yeah, Iowa, I think we had our first CIS facility right as the pandemic was starting, or they were just getting right into it. So I didn't even realize the program was older than the pandemic. But that's awesome that you guys have been able to take advantage of that and like you said, be able to ship across state lines and then also work with other federally inspected facilities that way. So when you and I first met, I think that you found out about Chop Local through our shipping course, possibly. And I remember you and I talking, we got on the phone and talked about what we're seeing in the small meat processing world, which this was probably right about a year ago that we talked, spring of 2024, because it was before you had your 20th anniversary celebration.
Correct.
But we were talking about how some of the lockers in the Midwest, and for those of you listening in other parts of the country, we call them lockers. Do you call them lockers in Wisconsin too, or what do you refer to it as?
No, they're well, they call them slaughterhouses, but
Slaughterhouses. Okay, we call them lockers in Iowa, but all right. So our small meat processors, whatever you want to call them, we were just hearing more and more that some of them that had been so busy during the pandemic, booking out appointments 18 to 24 months in advance, things had slowed down dramatically. And I think there's a variety of reasons for that. The cattle market seems to be a big part of that. In some areas of the country, it seems like there are more processors now. There are more of them. Some of them got grants and they have increased or I guess upgraded their level of inspection. So maybe there's more competition. But basically, we were hearing that, for years we were booked up solid, literally a year in advance at least. And now all of a sudden things are slowing down. And I guess tell me your thoughts on that whole shift that we've seen happen now since the pandemic.
right. So let's go back a little bit before the pandemic. So to give a baseline, so historically, you would see a drop in production from probably March through June. And that was tied directly to when farmers were out in the field planting, correct? So what you'd see is fall slaughter, summer, then fall increase, get through the holidays, and then basically after February, March, it would drop off significantly. So we would see this cyclical activity for the prior 10 years until COVID hit. Okay, so then as everybody saw during COVID, things took off. People were cooking at home, people were buying at small butchers. Grocery stores were having problems getting meat. So a lot of customers started going to their local lockers, which is great. So we saw a lot of growth during that time, which a lot of people did. And as Katie mentioned, we were scheduled out 2 years in advance, which was awesome, right? But then as the end of the pandemic hit towards end of 21, early 22, there was some softening, and then in 23 it was significant, almost back to pre-2020 levels. Now, we had grown significantly throughout the pandemic, so while there was a dip, it wasn't as significant as the prior dip. However, we were going back to that. Now, what we did notice is that a lot of our producers, and the ones that were the strongest were the direct marketers, they grew during the pandemic and they continued to grow after the pandemic. So they were scheduling out a year in advance. But like most producers, they have their animals coming in the fall, late summer and fall. So that creates a challenge for all of us where we're seeing this dip from March until probably June, July when the fair season starts, right? So we have the fairs going on and the county fairs. So then business picks up again. You have some business, summer business, which is great. But there's that 3 to 4 month window there where you see a dip. And so that's when I reached out to Katie to talk about opportunities to grow our sales as we had online sales, but we weren't happy with what they were doing. And we wanted to change and look at it a little bit differently to smooth that gap and try to fill that in with something besides our standard farmers and producers that came in all the time.
So, if I'm understanding correctly, like you said, there's always that cycle where you had that dip in the spring because farmers are busy, cattle aren't finishing that time of year, that type of thing, right? But then maybe that dip hasn't been quite as pronounced since the pandemic, but it is back. It's there. You're seeing it, right? So we talked about online sales as being one way to help even that out. And if I remember right, or you tell me if this is still part of your plan, you talked also about wanting to purchase some animals and sell quarters and halves directly through your shop. Is that right too?
That's correct. So
So do processing for yourself, for your customers, basically to keep busy during that time.
yeah, so that's something that, so what can we control? We can't control when the farmers finish their animals and when they bring them in. We know when they're going to bring them in, and then we know that we have this 3 month, 4 month dip. So we started looking at processing for ourselves and trying to drive sales of quarters and halves to customers that we have. Now, the challenge is that the customers that we have, we're buying throughout the year. So how do you get them on that schedule? But then, after having taken one of the marketing classes with Katie and her team, we identified the opportunity to start driving more sales to the months that we wanted to. So we have specific sales in the months of April and May, pushing quarters and halves or halves and wholes of pigs to drive, to fill that gap, to give me something for my team to work on to continue to process, because the biggest challenge is finding the skilled laborers, training them, and then you have to keep them when it's slow. So when it's slow, you can only clean the building so many times, right? So you clean, you repair, you do some training, but if your production drops significantly, which at times it will drop almost 50% for us, we have to do other things. And so my initiative when I started talking with Katie was to grow sales for us both online and then other opportunities to drive continued production with the team we have during the slower months.
Yeah, I think that that's so smart. And, you know, to some extent, that's not something brand new. The meat industry has always run sales and promotions at certain times of year to move certain cuts of meat. But it's not something that I feel like our smaller processors have thought a lot about. And I commend you guys for thinking about that and using that as a way to kind of even out things throughout the year. Not only keep your employees busy, but bring some cash flow into the business too, which is really important. So a couple things. I don't know if you did email marketing before we talked, but you've really spent some time on it since then, right?
Yeah, so there, when we first met, I think we talked about like a three-pronged approach. It was driving more customers to purchase quarters and halves from us directly, drive customers into our retail storefront to grow the foot traffic there because that's our higher margin products, and then to increase our social media and online presence. So we were able to do that in working with Katie and her team in a couple of different ways. First thing was the newsletter. I think we took one of your courses on the newsletter, and that was great. So we started with the newsletter and basically started creating a message and getting people to sign up. But it just wasn't as easy as creating a newsletter. We also spent a significant amount of marketing dollars on digital advertising to drive customers through Google Ads to our website. And when they get to our website, then they can sign up for the newsletter, or they can jump off and go to our store, which is through the ChopLocal site. So we're there hitting all three of the things we wanted to get to. We're growing our presence online. We grew the newsletter, which has been great. So last I checked, Katie, we were at 605 subscribers as of last week. And I think that's been in 6 months. So that's, yeah, for the level of our business, I think that's great. And we're seeing very few drops. So we continue to promote new products, promote sales, but also just get more word out to people about our business.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You mentioned your higher margin products are in your store there. What, if you don't mind sharing, what products do you have those higher margins are on, and what are kind of some of your best sellers?
Well, the best seller, like most of the producers, is our ground beef. Now, that's not our highest margin product, but it people in.
Yeah, what do you sell your ground beef for? I'm just curious.
We just raised it to 550 a pound.
You just raised it to 5.50 a pound. No wonder it's a fantastic seller because even in the Midwest, like that is a deal. I'm gonna have to order some ground beef from Cedar Road because
So online, it's a little more expensive. In the store, it's 550, and we've kept it there, but that gets people in the building. And then our steaks, highest margin product. And then we have a variety of brats. We have about 10 different brats that we sell only at our location. We started doing marinated products, so like value added products. And then our bacon is our best selling and highest margin product as well. So we have some smoked products, but good variety. And so we've been able to, through the newsletter and through social media, is tell people more about here are the products we have. Hey, come and buy these. And then people start to find you and they come more frequently, which has been great.
I think I heard from Sydney too. Sydney's been up to visit once because she had an event in the area that your beef sticks are amazing also. Are those really popular?
Yeah, they are. Unfortunately, in the state of Wisconsin, we have 350 small meat processors, and everybody makes their own meat sticks. So ours are great, but you got to come to our shop to get them, or we'll ship them through ChopLocal. So
What about cuts that just don't sell? Are there things that you just grind? And particularly I want to know how roasts go in your area because we just hear mixed results on selling roasts.
So roasts do not sell online. I mean, I think you've seen that they don't move. They sell in the store, but they're very seasonal. So probably about October, November timeframe, when the weather turns, beef roasts, pork roasts start moving. And then probably in another couple of weeks, they'll start to slow by about the end of February and March. So we do a couple different things with them. We either grind it and make ground products with it. That's pretty much the main thing. We use it for brats if we don't sell them. We keep just enough and we keep moving through and we don't overstock on the roast because we know that they're a little bit cyclical. And then we just keep as many as our customers feel there's a need for. But yeah, the roasts are always a challenge. So tend to make more ground product out of what's left.
Interesting. Yeah, we raise beef here on our farm, but we only have 4 cows. And the way that it worked out is we actually got to the end of what was in our freezer last summer. And so I've been actually having to buy beef. But last summer, like I said, I got to the end of what was in the freezer, and guess what was left? It was all roasts. And I'm like, it's July. What am I going to do with roasts? Had some pork roasts in there too, but I ended up cooking them all summer in the crock pot. It meant that I didn't have to heat up my kitchen. I didn't have to stand at the hot stove or the hot grill. And then I used them for all sorts of things like sandwiches, but we also made like pulled pork nachos with them. And, we started to get really creative with our leftovers. I wish people knew that this was such a versatile product because it really is, but they just don't seem to reach for it online at least. So.
Yeah, and so that's something we try to do through the newsletter. So recipes, like here's what you do with your roast, here's what you do with your leftovers, here's things you could make that people don't think of. And especially if it's out of season, I don't want to make a roast in the middle of summer, but there are a lot of different things you can do with them. And we've tried to, through the newsletter or our social media ads, is to tell people, here's what you can do with these roasts and feed your family for a week and get creative with it.
Yeah, that's really great. Great advice. And almost everybody I've interviewed for this podcast has said the same thing that including some cooking tips and ideas in their meat marketing really makes a difference. So I also got to say, I love value added, like the brats, flavored brats. Just, I love them for ease of cooking for our family. The marinated products you said, there are definitely customers out there that want that convenience and it's worth it for them. So every spring and fall, we host a webinar series, free educational events for farmers and butcher shops that are selling direct to consumer. Sydney, tell us a little bit about our spring 2025 webinar series that we have planned.
Yeah, so first of all, we are going to start with Stephen Ussery of Stewards Unlimited. He talks about the USDA Business Builder Grants. And before I go any further, I guess I should say you can always find these recordings on our YouTube. And by the time this is published, a few of our 2025 webinars may have already been uploaded there. But then after Stephen's webinar in February, we will be talking about how to get people to buy from your online store. I feel like that's a huge conversation we have with our farms, but also tons of just, farms and butcher shops we talk to across the country. Like, I have this online store, but everybody just keeps texting me or saying they want to meet in person or whatever it is. And so we're going to talk about lots of different strategies to get people to actually use your online store so that you're not having to field all those calls and messages and Facebook comments or whatever it may be. And then in March, we are actually going to be having Sierra, our marketing specialist. I feel like we've mentioned her. Sierra will be talking about social media strategies. And so I know we've kind of talked about social media in the past on webinars, but she's going to take a little bit different of an approach. She's really good at Reels, so I know we're going to have her talk about that, but just some other strategies that she sees success with. So I know that one will definitely be popular. And then our last webinar of the season will be about how to turn your farmers market customers into year-round customers. We feel like that's a good timing. I know a lot of our vendors are starting to think about farmers market season in that April timeframe. And so we're going to walk through some methods to kind of convert those customers into purchasing from you year round. So we're really excited about this lineup of webinars. We definitely think they're going to provide a lot of value. And we're just really excited to be able to connect with those farms and butcher shops through this series. So like I said earlier, you can always find our recordings on our YouTube channel, and you can get registered as well at ChopLocalUniversity.com.
Going back to talking about your employees, and keeping them, like you said, part of how you measure success is that everybody's getting a sustainable living wage, and keeping your employees from turning over, especially once you've trained them. You don't have to give me specific numbers if you don't want to, but I'm curious if you've found that you have to basically keep up with certain other industries and their wages in order to keep your employees.
Our biggest challenge is the other meat lockers in our area. So there are probably 5 within a 20-mile radius. And then we are a half an hour from a Johnsonville sausage plant where they actually slaughter hogs. Huge facility, half an hour away, which is great because you can find some employees, but you can also lose some to that facility. However, that work is a lot more taxing than what we're doing at our small facility. So the challenge is we have about 5 facilities within a 20-mile radius, and they're all about the same size. Similar headcount from employees, similar size from a butchering standpoint. And so like most skilled laborers do, they go where whoever pays the best, right? And so our biggest challenge is to work with our competition to make sure we're not stealing each other's employees. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but that's always a challenge. So we're an hour from Milwaukee and an hour from Madison, and we're paying decent wage that competes with those areas. But it's finding skilled laborers that can do this type of work. You can train people, which is great, but you have to have a lot of patience and it'll take you a lot of time. But I can give you an example. There's logistics and warehousing places within a half an hour, 40 minutes near Milwaukee. They're hiring at $18 to $19 an hour. My lowest employee on scale, she's a packaging person. She makes more than that. Okay. So we're paying more because it's skilled. Plus we're in a hard to get to location, or we're not near a large population base, which most of our competitors are not either. So you have to pay a little bit more, but you have to offer them other benefits, other things to keep them. Small things, like clothing, hats, jackets. We feed our employees on Fridays. We slaughter once a week on Fridays, and we cook them a meal that they have every Friday. So little things that we can give back to them to make it stickier, to keep them and make it more difficult to jump for 50 cents an hour more or $1 an hour more.
Yeah, Jared, my business partner who was on the first episode of this podcast, he has a few farm employees, and they all eat together every Friday noon too. In his house, his wife cooks for him, and I know that really helps with the camaraderie. So just that little thing is a good idea. It's hard to put a blanket statement on this is what your wage needs to be, but you're right. You have to look at who you're competing with and know that, okay, if they weren't going to work for me, they could go somewhere else. And maybe it is a factory. The one, Rebecca Thistlethwaite from the Niche Meat Processors Assistance Network, I heard her once say, you have to be able to compete with construction jobs in your area, and like I said, maybe it's a different industry in different areas, but I think that looking at it that way and saying, where else could these people work that might even be easier on them. You have to take that into consideration. But it sounds like you've done a good job kind of creating an atmosphere and figuring that out. So,
Yeah, but it's taken some time. It didn't happen overnight, right?
right, right. So having the competitors so near you, several other facilities, do you all kind of do things a little bit differently? Do you work together? Or, I mean, has that been a benefit or has it been a challenge at times?
So I think initially it was a challenge, but over the years we tend to collaborate more with each other, whether a piece of equipment breaks or you're missing a spice that you need to make something that day. And actually, several of them, we sell products across our facilities, and it's been really good. One of our closest competitors, he's been more like a mentor to me. And so we've been able to share employees because he slaughters on a different day and everybody has the same issue. So we don't have extra employees. So if one or two people are gone or they're sick, you lose 20 to 30% of your production or your workforce. And then it's hard. So either you as the owner do the work or you call your competitors and ask them if they have somebody available, if they can help out and fill in. So we've been doing that for probably since COVID. I think that's helped everybody realize that working together is better than working against each other. And so we've worked, I would say, more closely in the last 5 years than we did prior.
Yeah. What a great relationship to be able to do that. And I think that's, yeah. So you don't do deer processing anymore.
No, we stopped about 8 years ago. We used to process deer on site and then make all the smoked meats. Just last year was our last year that we would make boneless venison. So you could bring in your venison and we would make different products. But this is the first year we're not doing that. We slowly moved away from that. So that was great when we started initially because that was a huge jump during the hunting season. But as we mentioned earlier, that's also when you're busiest with your farmers. So you would basically have to shut down doing your custom processing for beef, pork, and lamb to take care of venison. And then when you were done, you would start back up, but then you had all this venison to make on top of everything else you were doing. And so that would stretch your resources significantly. And the venison season, 1 year could be great and 1 year could be very low. So you're kind of rolling the dice. And there's places that do thousands of deer every year, which is great. And 1 year we did 600, then the next year we did 200 deer. So it's hard to ramp up and yeah, very unpredictable. And the weather's changed quite a bit. We have warmer falls than expected, and so the hunt is down, and it's just too unpredictable. And we were able. It was a shock the first couple years, but since then we've made up with. Basically, we have 2 additional beef slaughters. It doesn't impact our ongoing production, and I think our farmers are probably happier with it as well.
When, as a business owner, are there some general principles that you keep in mind when you're making decisions like that, deciding whether or not to continue with your venison processing? Or do you have some business philosophies, I guess, that can apply in a lot of different scenarios?
Well, at that time, I decided that we needed to go with what was our wheelhouse, and we were good at processing, slaughtering beef, slaughtering hogs, processing those animals. Deer was a challenge because the hunter could drop off a deer and it was nice and warm, and you'd skin it. That's great. And then the next one, they drop it off, it's frozen rock hard, and now you have to thaw it out, bring it in the building, skin it. It doesn't skin that easily. Skinning your own deer right after you shoot it, it's great and it seems simple. Skinning 100 deer from 100 different hunters, it's not, doesn't sound great, right? And then you have to decide, is it worth it? What's the level of pain that you're going to go through? And it was just for us at the time, for that one, we wanted to move away from that and start to grow in other areas. That's where we decided to grow the in-store business, or retail side. But in more of a to your general question, I look at things that we're good at. So there's some things that we do and some things we don't. And just in the last probably 2 years, we've added some in-store products that we've never had because customers have asked for it. but it was because in the past, one, we didn't have the knowledge, or we weren't comfortable doing it, or we didn't have the sell through. So we we're selling a ton of chicken now, marinated chicken, whole chickens, chicken breasts. Where in the past we couldn't move any chicken. Well, during COVID we offered chicken, and now we've promoted that we have it, and our customers know that. So that as we saw that was moving the products, and we got more comfortable with making it, we started to offer it. Same thing as jerky. Jerky, as a lot of people know, it's very finicky to meet all the water activity levels and get approval. It can be a challenge. But if you make a good jerky, you can sell a lot. And that's been a challenge for us, but we learned what we could do with jerky, and we sell what we know we can make, and we only sell it in store. So I'm not going to bag it and ship it to grocery stores, because that adds a whole nother level of complexity and inspection. So we just sell it in house, and we do a great job with our jerky that we sell in house. So in general, we stick with things that like we know we can do.
So if you were considering something new, or like when you were working towards the chicken or working towards getting the jerky figured out, do you take the approach of kind of testing it on a small scale before you commit to a larger thing? Or maybe with the jerky, I could see where if you were going to go through the inspection process to figure it out, you knew, maybe you knew it had to work. Like,
Mhm.
we can't just kind of dabble in jerky. We've got to figure it out and make it work.
We usually start with small scale, and then we see if the product moves. So we started tracking. So one of the things in the last couple of years we've done a much better job on is tracking inventory and sell through rates in the store. Our store sales have grown significantly in the last 2 years. We had a great jump in COVID. And then 2 years ago, I bought really nice professional display freezers like you see in a grocery store. So your product looks nice. And then we started adding, and as you add products, then you promote it, and you'll see if stuff moves and if it doesn't move. And now we're watching more closely. All of a sudden, like I mentioned, the marinated chickens. We started with probably 5 or 6 different types of marinated chickens, and after 3 months, we could see that two of them didn't move, so we eliminated them and added something else. So trial and error, make small batches. That's the main thing. We always make a small batch. And then if we see that selling through, or the other thing we'll see is customers, now that we have a larger customer base coming in and the store traffic is higher, we're getting people asking us for certain things. So let's just take jerky. We didn't have a super hot, spicy jerky. They kept asking us for a hotter jerky. So we made one, and now it's selling. So we'll stick with it. So customers, or repeat customers, start coming up with stuff that they want to see, and if it works for a couple, it'll probably work for more. So
Yeah, that's good advice. We've always taken that approach too, where it's a little bit harder with technology and stuff, but we can test it and see if there's a demand for it. Well, you just saw probably we sent out a little survey that said, "What courses do you want to see this spring?" That's our way of saying, what are you guys looking for? What can we do that will be popular before we invest our time and money into creating something new? It's the same concept. So,
yeah, on that note, we literally had this conversation last week. So we've increased our social media campaigns, and I think it's this week or next week we are basically going to ask our followers, what do you want to see in the store? Do you want more of this? Do you want less of that? And then gauge that and add things or take things away.
yeah, that's a great strategy. And not only just to actually get that information from them, but on social media, you want to increase engagement. You want to get people to comment as much as possible. And so asking those types of questions will help get that engagement and help get your post seen by more people too. So, yeah. Speaking of like trends and what people are asking for, do you sell a lot of offal or variety meats like heart, kidneys, that type of for those of you listening not watching, Mark has a huge smile on his face and nodding his head. So yes you do.
Yes. So give you a backstory. So as most processors know, when you slaughter on site, you have a rendering company that hauls away all your stuff, right? So blood, internal intestines, all that stuff. And then you usually have a lot of offal, right? You have hearts, liver, tongue, et cetera, et cetera. And when I bought the business from my parents, they were basically throwing out most of the offal, meaning I was paying a rendering company to haul it away.
Yeah, not just throwing it out. You're paying somebody to take it from you.
I'm paying somebody to haul away. So in the last probably 4 years, a couple things have happened. Pet treats, so pet industry has taken off. And then, as you mentioned, there's a larger request for those types of products, not just for pet treats, but also for people on different diets, whether it's paleo or carnivore, or people wanting to use beef tallow again, leaf lard.
I was going to ask about tallow. That was the one that we're seeing like crazy lately. So, yeah.
Yeah. So basically, we started saving everything. Okay. So we send a pallet probably every 2 weeks to a pet food producer. Okay. So he makes dehydrated treats and whatnot, which is great because we actually buy back from him, and now we're selling dehydrated heart, liver, etc.
But but you don't want to make it yourself? Is that one of those stick with what you're really good at things? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so whole different. So this is you're making pet food now. All right, so whole different approval process, whole different licensing. So we can have pet treats and pet food to make it yourself. So I could probably smoke and dry stuff in my smoker. I don't have a dehydrator, so different investment. Believe me, we tried.
But it's a good way to work with somebody else then and have a cooperation and, cooperate with them instead of trying to do everything yourself and getting spread too thin. So,
Yeah, so now we bring back product from them, the dehydrated pet treats, which is great. So now we're offering pet treats, so our customers are getting that. And then in the last probably 6 months, well, a couple things. Then we have people buying beef tongue, beef heart, right, for themselves. Then we have some people buying it for their pets, so they'll chop it up and make it for their pets. We basically have a wait list now for our beef heart and beef tongues. The other thing is oxtail, and then getting to the beef fat and beef suet. That's taken off probably in the last 6 months. So now we would have it and we sell it to a couple of our larger customers that make beef tallow. But now we have people asking for it in the store, asking for it online. So now we're selling it on a weekly basis. So this is something that we were throwing out, the extra beef fat, the beef suet. We're now holding it back and we're reselling all of that as well.
and getting extra value out of it, making yourselves more efficient that way. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. It'll be interesting to see where these trends go because, if you didn't have a wait list for some of those products, I was going to say people buy them online because they can't find them all the time locally, and so they're Googling it and they're finding them on ChopLocal instead. But your store location, so you said your parents built it on the farm. Is it still kind of out in the country? Is it off the beaten path?
Yep. So we're still out in the middle of, I like to say, middle of nowhere, literally in the middle of farm field. We are 2 miles from the local village, one to the north and 2 miles to the south of the other village. So we're located on Cedar Road in the middle of the field. So there's barns around us, and which is great for when you are slaughtering animals because having a slaughter facility in a metropolitan area is not conducive to a lot of things. And sometimes animals get out.
I was just gonna say I just talked to a producer the other day that told me that his steer got out at the locker and was roaming around downtown where the small town where he was getting it processed. So
That is the biggest nightmare of a small processor.
unfortunately it happens. You should look this up afterwards, but I think it was a water buffalo escaped from the Iowa State Fair last year and was roaming around downtown Des Moines for days. It was wild. So anyway, okay, one question, and I don't want to put you in a tight spot here, but the question is, when you're working with farmers or producers, ranchers, they would call them in other parts of the country, although I call them all farmers here. What do you want to see from those farmers and producers that make it, I don't want to say make it easier for you, but make for a better working relationship? Your ideal farmers, what are they like? The ones that you would bend over backwards to open up an appointment for if they called you if they called you and really needed it.
Yeah, that's a great question, Katie. So there are multiple levels of farmers, as we call them, but not everybody's a farmer right now, right? So we have direct marketers, you have hobby farmers, so they have one steer the whole year, but it's the most important steer to them.
Well, obviously, that's the one that's going to fill their freezer. They need that.
Yeah. And then you have your dairy farmers who sell a couple steers to their relatives. Okay. So kind of those three categories. And they all have different needs. So it's understanding their needs and challenges. But the ones for us that we have the best relationship with and that we've grown with in the 20 years and they've been with us that long are the direct marketers because they're typically running it like a business. And by that, I mean they price accordingly because they're trying to make money. They have a customer base where they have a process they go through to get those customers and then to keep the customers. And then they're great about providing us information because the biggest challenge we have is you can drop the steer off, but if I don't know who's getting the 4 quarters, I can't do much with that steer. So the direct marketers are great with getting their customer names or getting their customers to call in their orders, but then also picking it up and getting it back out of our building. So those are the best producers we work with, and they'll schedule out. So we're scheduling 26 right now with our direct marketers, and we have probably a dozen of those, and they do anywhere from 10 to 20 a year. But they know next year already because they either have a wait list or the list of customers they sell to directly are telling them, I took one in March this year. I'll take one again next year already. Put me down. So he has his cattle scheduled for next year already. And then obviously he has to figure out how to raise the animal and get it ready for the slaughter date. But yeah, those are the best people that we work with because they see we offer a service that helps them basically run their business as they offer a service to their customers.
Gotcha. So it's really that business to business partnership. That makes sense completely. It is interesting to me that they are still booking out. We're filming this, recording this in February, and you're saying they're booking out into 2026 already. So, yep, interesting.
Yeah, so just to give you an idea on the slaughter schedule, we're at 95% for this year. Our only gaps are in those months that we mentioned, so like March, April, May. Fall is fully booked through January, and then we're booking fall of 26 for the larger direct marketers.
Fantastic. So for people listening, other butchers, other shop owners that are listening who aren't there yet, what's your advice to them?
Yeah, so it obviously takes time, right? So, and a lot of people, we were able to ride the wave of the pandemic, which was great. But then you had to sustain after that. And I think one of the reasons we were able to, we had a nice jump, but then we stayed at that level. We didn't drop back down to pre-COVID levels. And part of it was being consistent and providing a good service to our customers. And that meant adding more employees, adding more pieces of equipment, upgrading our facilities, improving our own internal processes, whether how we accept customers from taking their orders to how we reach out to our customers to tell them to get their orders. Everything we had to continuously improve. So while things are going great now and we're sustainable, there are a lot of small improvements that we had to make over time that you just can't make immediately. But to build a reputation that you can offer good service and get back to them, let them know you're going to do what you say you're going to do, and then be honest with the producers and the customers. And sometimes you make mistakes, and you have to let them know. You'll we made a mistake, but we can fix it. The craziest thing, and it's the hardest thing, is if you cut the meat wrong, you can't put it back together, right?
Can't undo it, right? Yeah.
But you have meat in the building. We can figure it out. So I cut your steaks wrong. Well, we have other steaks. We'll make it work.
But let's communicate that with them, right? And I'm sure that that's what you would say is let's.
Yep, just be open and honest. There's always the myth of the butcher stealing people's meat. Trust me, I don't need to. I have limited freezer space. I don't want to keep other people's meat.
Well, I think that when you started listing things about upgrading equipment and adding employees, I'm thinking cha-ching, cha-ching, But then when you say provide great service, communicate with them, and work on your internal processes, those are things that you can do that don't take a huge investment, right? It's just about that attitude of, like you said, continually getting better every day. And I think understanding that if you want to build a relationship with those long-term direct marketers, because those are the ones that are going to bring you the consistent business, not just one deer per year or one steer per year, you know, being that partner and having that great attitude of customer service is really, really important. And that's something everybody
Yeah.
can do.
Yeah. And it's being open and communicating, like you mentioned. A real small, easy thing is answer the phone and then call them back. So you get a lot of messages, call them back, let them know you got the message, and then follow up.
Yeah.
That's huge. And just to add to the growth, we have over 400 different farmers. They're not all direct marketers. So we have the guys with one and two. So we focus on the 40 or 50 that are a large percent of our business. But then those get the ones and twos because people start to give referrals.
Yeah.
And we now have, as crazy as it might sound, we have people coming from south of the border, north of Chicago, up to our facility. We have people as far away as Sheboygan, which is north of Green Bay or over by Green Bay, coming down to our facility. And then we have people down near Racine, which is near the Illinois border, south of Milwaukee. There are other facilities they can go to, but either the facilities are booked, they don't like something about the facility. So we started with as close as we could with the people around us, and then over time we grew.
Yeah. That's really, really interesting. And I think it does show that you do have those relationships and that customer service. The other thing I was going to throw out there, this goes into those processes that you can improve upon is butcher shops, lockers right now. I'm going to direct this to them and I'm going to put on my teacher voice. If you don't have a website that answers your basic questions, if you are inundated with phone calls answering the same questions over and over and over again, you need to take a look at your website and get it updated, because that will save you so many of those questions. If you have the website and it's easy to find and it's well organized, that is one of those things that you can improve upon for fairly inexpensively. So,
Yeah, and that's a great point. So website is kind of like you need to have that. That's the basics, right? And actually, last week I was looking at how to integrate a chat bot into our site because basically it's your instant chat and it's when are your hours. Now it's all on my website, but people don't want to look for it. If I have the instant chat pop up and I just type in what are your prices? Do you offer this? And so that's the next step for us to continue to improve so I can reduce the calls that my team's getting where they ask. And we've tested this. 90% of our calls are you open? Will you be there? I'm coming to get my meat. Are you there? What do I need to bring? Well, that takes somebody's time away from actually taking an order or waiting on a customer. So the more we can provide that information, whether it's through social media or through the website, it has to be done.
yeah, definitely. And I feel like for butcher shops or lockers that have been in business for a few years, it's like they knew they needed a website 10 years ago. And so a lot of them got it developed, but then it's just kind of sat there. And so it's time to maybe
Right.
take a look at it and see. And like you said, maybe an AI chatbot makes it so much easier for people to find what they need. We had a chatbot on ChopLocal for a while, but it was not AI, it was me.
Yeah, I had the worst type, right?
Yeah, and we were hoping it was more questions like, what cut of meat should I use to make fajitas tonight? You know, or maybe not tonight, but instead it was a lot of when is my order going to ship? What has it arrived? You know, those types of things.
transactional, transactional questions. Yeah,
Yep. And you're right. I should do the same thing. You're inspiring me. I should go and look and see if we can find an AI chatbot that we can install that would look up their order number and then answer that for them. So
definitely. Always improving.
that's right. Well, Mark, this has been great to talk to you. Almost everybody, I think everybody I've talked to so far is on the farmer side of things. And so it's nice to talk to somebody that's more on the processing side
Sure.
with your retail shop. If anybody wants to check out kind of what you're doing, we direct them to cedarroadmeats.com and then
Correct.
the Cedar Road Meats on Facebook as well. And of course, you can check out Marc's Chop Local store too. So,
Right. Thanks, Katie.
yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for tuning in to Meat Success. We hope this episode gave you fresh insights and inspiration to beef up your meat marketing. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe, Leave a review, follow us on social, and share with your fellow farmers and butchers. Have questions or ideas for future podcasts? Reach out to ChopLocalUniversity.com. Until next time, remember, there's more than one recipe for meat success.